Have you ever watched someone destroy something you spent years building, only to have them blame you when disaster strikes? That's exactly what happened when the Oak Ridge Estates HOA decided my private dam was an eyesore, and demolished it without permission, right before the worst rainy season in 50 years. I'm James Miller, 58, a retired civil engineer living on 5 acres of God's green earth in rural North Carolina. Years ago, I built a dam on my property, nothing fancy, just a solid, stone-faced beauty that turned a low spot into a retention pond. That dam wasn't just for show, it kept the downhill Oak Ridge Estates, with their manicured lawns and overpriced mailboxes, from floating away every time it rained. I've got the blueprints, rainfall logs, and every bolt accounted for in my home office. It's my baby, my legacy, my middle finger to chaos. I'd been out fishing, chasing bass and a little peace, when I rolled up to my property and saw something that made my blood boil, a backhoe ripping into my dam like it was auditioning for a demolition derby. Hard hats were everywhere, and there, strutting like she owned the place, was Victoria Harrington, Oak Ridge HOA president. Clipboard in one hand, steering her luxury SUV with the other, she looked like she'd just stepped out of a "How to Ruin Your Neighbor's Day" seminar. "Victoria, what the hell are you doing on my land?" I roared, clutching my property deed like it was the last beer in the cooler. She didn't even flinch. "James, this unsightly structure is tanking our property values," she said, waving her clipboard like it gave her divine right. "The community has authority to remove it." Community authority? On my 5 acres? I shoved the deed in her face, pointing to the survey lines clearer than a Monday morning hangover. "This is private property. Stop. Now." But the damage was done, my dam was half rubble, and Victoria just shrugged like she'd spilled coffee, not wrecked a man's pride. "Guys, let's talk. You come home to find your neighbors tearing down your workshop, your deck, or, God forbid, your smoker. What do? Call the sheriff? Grab a tire iron and channel your inner Eastwood? Or do you play the long game, knowing fate's got a wicked sense of humor? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how you'd handle these clipboard tyrants differently. As Victoria peeled out in her SUV, she tossed back, "You'll be hearing from our lawyers about your eyesore." I stood there, staring at my busted dam, then glanced at my phone's weather app, storms brewing, big ones. A grin crept across my face. "No, Victoria," I said to the dust cloud she left behind. "You'll be hearing from Mother Nature herself." Victoria thought destroying my dam was the end of the story. She didn't realize it was just the beginning of her neighborhood's worst nightmare. I retreated to my home office, a fortress of order amid the chaos, shelves packed with engineering textbooks worn from decades of use, topographical maps pinned to the walls like battle plans, and binders stuffed with rainfall logs going back to the Reagan administration. That dam wasn't just a mound of dirt and rock, it was a precision-engineered shield, holding back floods that would have turned Oak Ridge Estates into a swampy foreclosure auction years ago. Victoria and her HOA cronies had kicked a hornet's nest, and I wasn't about to let them skip away whistling while the downhill McMansions prepped for a swim. First, I grabbed my camera and turned my property into a crime scene investigation. I shot photos of the carnage, my dam's stone facing shattered like a cheap vase, the retention pond half drained into a muddy soup, and deep tire tracks from the HOA's hired bulldozer scarring my land like a toddler's tantrum. I switched to video, narrating every detail with the calm of a man who knows he's got the receipts. "Here's where they breached the spillway," I said, panning across the rubble. "And here's where they turned my pond into a sad puddle. Every angle, every gouge, documented, time-stamped, ready for court." Then I sat at my desk, cracked my knuckles, and drafted letters that hit harder than a sledgehammer. To the HOA board, the county commissioners, and the local emergency management office, I sent certified warnings, each one a masterclass in not-so-subtle shade. I laid out the stakes. Without my dam, Oak Ridge Estates was one big rain away from becoming Lake Suburbia. I backed it up with engineering calculations, flow rates, soil permeability, drainage slopes, plus 30 years of rainfall data showing this wasn't a what if, but a when. I even threw in a topo map highlighting Victoria's house at the neighborhood's lowest point, circled in red for extra, screw you. Act now, I wrote, or start shopping for pontoon boats. Victoria's response was peak HOA arrogance. At the next Oak Ridge Estates meeting, she stood up, her clipboard practically glowing with self-righteousness, and waved my letter like it was a parking ticket. This is just scare tactics from a bitter old man who can't handle progress, she sneered. The room erupted in nods and murmurs. Nothing bonds a neighborhood like a shared scapegoat. One guy in a polo even clapped, probably thinking he'd earned a gold star from Victoria's fan club. Meanwhile, the county official I got on the phone, a good guy named Carl, trapped in a cubicle of red tape, sounded like he'd aged 10 years just reading my letter. James, your numbers are solid, and I believe you, he said, but my hands are tied. We can't force the HOA to rebuild a private structure. Bureaucracy, the only thing slower than a county road crew. But not everyone in Oak Ridge was drinking Victoria's Kool-Aid. Late that week, my phone started buzzing with calls from nervous homeowners, always after dark, like they were smuggling state secrets. James, is it true about the flooding? One guy whispered, like his HOA overlords were tapping his line. A second homeowner, a woman with a voice like she'd smoked since kindergarten, admitted she'd seen my dam years ago and thought it was pretty cool, but stayed quiet at the meeting because Victoria's got everyone by the short hairs. I leveled with them, if those clouds open up, your cul-de-sac's gonna be an aquarium. Start moving your golf clubs to the attic. As I stuffed the last certified letter into its envelope, I glanced out my office window. The sky was bruising up, heavy with clouds that looked like they'd been holding a grudge. Victoria could smirk and dismiss me all she wanted. The rain was coming, and it wasn't in the mood for her nonsense. They thought I was exaggerating about the flood risk. Then the skies opened up, and suddenly my warnings didn't seem so funny anymore. 3 weeks after Victoria's HOA goon squad turned my dam into a sad pile of rubble, the heavens decided it was time for a reckoning. The forecast had been muttering about storms, but nobody, least of all the clipboard-wielding tyrants of Oak Ridge Estates, was ready for what rolled in. From my elevated property, I watched the clouds pile up like a bar fight in slow motion, dark and mean, dumping rain so thick it turned the air into a curtain. My pond, or what was left of it, churned with runoff that should have been tamed by my dam. Instead, that water had a new mission, to remind Oak Ridge Estates who's boss when gravity gets pissed. I'd rigged my security cameras to catch every angle of the deluge, partly for evidence, mostly because I'm a petty bastard who wanted to see karma do its thing. By day 2 of the downpour, the footage was pure gold. Water that my dam would have held back like a champ was now a brown, frothy beast, sluicing down the hill straight for Oak Ridge's cul-de-sacs. The lowest streets, prime real estate, according to Victoria's sales pitch, were the first to go. Puddles turned into ponds, then into rivers lapping at mailboxes and swamping those fancy landscaped yards. I zoomed in on one camera feed, a kid's tricycle floated by like it was auditioning for a post-apocalyptic regatta. By day 3, the water was knocking on doorsteps, then shoving its way inside. Basements filled like bathtubs, first floors got an unwanted indoor pool upgrade. Oak Ridge Estates, the jewel of suburban living, was starting to look like a knockoff Venice with worse plumbing. Victoria's house, naturally, took the hardest hit. Built at the neighborhood's lowest point, because nothing says HOA president like snagging the prime lot for yourself, it was practically begging for trouble. My cameras caught the whole show, water surging over her manicured lawn, swirling around her luxury SUV like it was trying to hotwire it, then pouring into her ground floor windows. I half expected to see her out there with her clipboard, scolding the flood for not having a permit. Instead, grainy footage showed her silhouette at an upstairs window, probably wondering how she'd spin this one at the next HOA meeting. Downhill, chaos reigned. Sirens wailed as emergency services scrambled, but the roads were a mess, half submerged, clogged with abandoned cars and debris. Fire trucks couldn't get through, rescue boats were deployed, which would have been hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. Oak Ridge residents, the same ones who'd clapped for Victoria's bitter old man speech, were now wading through knee-deep muck, hauling soggy furniture to higher ground. Social media lit up with their panic. Posts on the neighborhood app begged for sandbags, shared blurry photos of flooded living rooms, and tagged the county with all-caps cries for help. One guy posted a video of his garage, water gushing in like it had a personal vendetta, captioned, "This is insane. Who's responsible for this?" I sipped my coffee and resisted the urge to comment, "Ask your HOA president." My phone started ringing off the hook. First came the desperate ones, homeowners who'd called me in secret weeks ago, now openly freaking out. "James, it's worse than you said," one guy yelped, his voice half-drowned by the sound of splashing. "My basement's gone, and the insurance guy's saying it's not covered." Another, the raspy-voiced woman from before, was near tears, "We should have listened. What do we do now?" I kept my cool, told them to get to higher ground and save what they could. "Mother Nature doesn't negotiate," I said. "You'll have to ride this out." Then came the others, the ones who'd bought Victoria's line about me being the bad guy. Now they were singing a different tune, but not the one you'd expect. Instead of apologies, I got accusations. "Why didn't you fix the dam after they broke it?" one guy barked, like I was supposed to rebuild a precision-engineered structure with duct tape and spite. Another left a voicemail claiming my negligence caused the flood, as if I'd personally summoned the storm. I saved every message, every email, adding them to my growing file of Exhibit A for when this inevitably went legal. Victoria, true to form, wasn't about to let a little thing like a biblical flood slow her down. By day 4, with the rain still hammering, she was already on the neighborhood app, rallying her loyalists. "This is a tragedy caused by improper drainage from uphill properties," she posted, not so subtly pointing the finger at me. She even filed a complaint with the city, claiming my land was mismanaged and responsible for the runoff. I had to hand it to her, the woman's house was underwater, her HOA was in shambles, and she was still swinging like a cornered alley cat. Too bad for her, I'd been documenting every move since the first bulldozer showed up. Her lies were about to hit a wall harder than the water hit her living room. As the rain kept pounding, I sat back in my office, dry as a bone, watching my cameras capture Oak Ridge's downfall. The water didn't care about Victoria's title, her SUV, or her precious property values. It just kept rising, relentless, like the truth I'd been shouting for weeks. I leaned back, cracked a beer, and toasted to the one thing nobody in Oak Ridge could blame me for, gravity. Victoria thought she could drown the truth in legal threats. She didn't realize I had been documenting everything since day one. The floodwaters hadn't even started to recede when the county called an emergency town hall meeting at the courthouse, a squat brick building that smelled like old coffee and older grudges. Oak Ridge Estates residents packed the room, soggy and furious, demanding answers while their homes sat marinating in mud. I walked in with a banker's box under my arm, stuffed to the brim with my war chest, property surveys, dam construction plans, maintenance logs, certified mail receipts, security footage, and every warning letter I'd sent. Victoria could spin her tales, but I had the receipts to bury her. The room buzzed with tension as the county assessor kicked things off, trying to calm the mob with promises of FEMA aid and infrastructure reviews. Residents weren't having it. "Who's paying for my ruined floors?" one guy shouted, his polo still stained with floodwater. "Why didn't anyone warn us?" a woman demanded, clutching a soggy photo album. I stayed quiet in the back, letting the chaos simmer. My turn was coming. When the floor opened for comments, I stepped up, box in hand, and set it on the table like I was laying down a royal flush. "I've got some answers," I said, voice steady as I pulled out my first exhibit, a property survey, clear as day, showing my dam was 100% on my land. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Next, I held up my dam's construction plans, complete with engineering specs and permits from back when Oak Ridge was just a twinkle in a developer's eye. "This dam," I said, "kept your homes dry for years. Until the HOA decided it was an eyesore and tore it down without my consent. I fired up a laptop and played the security footage, crystal clear shots of Victoria's hired crew ripping into my dam, her SUV parked like a general's jeep overseeing the carnage. Gasps and whispers filled the room, a few folks glared at Victoria, who was sitting up front, clipboard still in her lap like a security blanket. I kept going, showing before and after aerial photos, my dam intact, holding back water like a champ, versus the post-demolition mess that turned Oak Ridge into a swamp. I layered on my engineering analyses, graphs of runoff projections that matched the flood's path to AT. I warned the HOA, I said, slapping down a stack of certified mail receipts. I warned the county. I warned emergency management. Nobody listened. The emergency management director, a grizzled guy who looked like he'd seen too many storms, took the mic next. James's numbers were spot on, he said. We got his letter weeks ago, flagged it as urgent. But the HOA dismissed it. The room erupted, shouts, curses, a few choice words for Victoria that would have made a sailor blush. The county assessor chimed in, confirming my property boundaries with a dry, Mr. Miller's dam was well within his legal rights. The HOA had no authority to touch it. Victoria wasn't going down without a fight. She shot to her feet, interrupting like a kid caught cheating on a test. This is outrageous, she screeched, pointing at me. If James cared about the community, he would have rebuilt that dam after it was removed. His negligence caused this flood. The gall of it almost made me laugh. Her HOA stooges nodded along, but the rest of the room wasn't buying it. The HOA's lawyer, a sweaty guy in a cheap suit, shifted in his seat, eyeing the exit like he wanted to bolt. I caught his glance and held up my final piece, proof of delivery for every warning letter, including the one to Victoria's own mailbox. Negligence? I said, staring her down. You were told exactly what would happen. You chose to play queen instead of listen. The turning point came fast. A couple of HOA board members, looking like they just realized they backed the wrong horse, stood up. One, a nervous guy who always wore golf shirts, cleared his throat. We, weren't fully informed about the property lines, he mumbled. Victoria said the dam was on community land. Another board member, a woman with a perm straight out of the 80s, nodded. We thought it was just a landscaping issue. We didn't know it stopped floods. The crowd turned on Victoria like sharks smelling blood. You lied to us, someone yelled. My house is ruined because of you, another added. The lawyer finally spoke, voice shaky. Based on this evidence, the HOA's actions may have been misguided. Misguided? That's lawyer speak for we're screwed. Victoria's face went from red to ghost white, her clipboard trembling in her hands. The assessor banged his gavel, calling for order, but the damage was done. The truth was out, and it was uglier than the mold growing in Oak Ridge's basements. As I packed up my box, the crowd still buzzing, I caught Victoria's eye. She looked smaller somehow, like the flood had washed away her crown. My dam was still gone, but I'd just rebuilt something better, the truth. And it was about to flow through Oak Ridge like a river nobody could stop. They destroyed my dam to improve their view. Now they're viewing their neighborhood through the windows of temporary housing. 6 months after the flood, Oak Ridge Estates was still a mess, a soggy ghost town of tarps, construction cones, and "for sale" signs nobody was biting on. Half the homes were uninhabitable, their basements breeding grounds for mold that laughed at bleach. Foundation crews jackhammered away, trying to salvage what was left, while property values tanked so hard you could hear the realtors crying from my hill. Victoria's dream of a pristine suburb had drowned, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the view from my dry, cozy porch. The legal fallout hit like a second storm. Victoria was neck-deep in lawsuits, homeowners suing her for damages, the county piling on with fines for unauthorized property destruction. Then came the criminal charges, destruction of private property, with my security footage as the star witness. The HOA's insurance company, smelling the stink of liability, slammed the door on coverage, leaving the board to foot the bill for their misguided bulldozer party. Victoria's resignation was less a choice than a surrender. She scrawled her name on the paperwork and slunk out of the HOA meeting, her clipboard nowhere in sight. Her waterlogged McMansion sold at a fire sale price, barely enough to cover her legal fees, from what I heard. Last I checked, she was renting a condo 2 counties over, probably still blaming me for her bad karma. The county, meanwhile, rolled out the red carpet for me to rebuild. They greenlit permits for a new dam, bigger, stronger, with a spillway that could handle a monsoon. The best part? The HOA's settlement funds covered every penny, a sweet little, sorry we trashed your life, check that I cashed with a grin. I was out there with the crew, double-checking the rebar and concrete mix like the nerd I am, making sure this dam would outlast every last Oak Ridge mailbox. The new HOA board, minus Victoria's loyalists, came knocking, hats in hand, asking if I'd lend my engineering brain to their water management plans. We want to do this right, their new president said, a quiet guy who looked like he'd rather be fishing. I agreed, but not before slipping in a jab, long as nobody brings a backhoe. A few residents even showed up at my gate, faces red from shame or sun, offering apologies that ranged from heartfelt to awkward. The raspy-voiced woman from the late-night calls brought me a pie, apple, decent crust, and said, we should have backed you from the start. Another guy, the polo-wearing clapper from Victoria's meeting, mumbled something about misunderstandings, and handed me a 6-pack of IPA. I took the beer, kept my smirk in check, and told them to spread the word, don't mess with a man's dam. Most of Oak Ridge still avoided me, probably too proud to admit they'd cheered for the wrong team, but that was fine. I didn't need their friendship, just their respect. Guys, sometimes the best revenge is being right and having the paperwork to prove it. Ever deal with neighbors who thought they could steamroll you, only to eat crow when the truth came out? Did you rub it in, let it slide, or just sip a cold one and watch the world turn? Drop your stories in the comments, I want to hear your tales of petty justice. And if you've enjoyed this saga of HOA karma, smash that like button, share it with your buddies who've tangled with neighborhood tyrants, and subscribe for more stories where the little guy wins. Hit that bell, too, so you don't miss the next one. Got a neighbor horror story? Spill it below, let's swap some battle scars. As I stood on my rebuilt dam, watching the pond fill up under a clear sky, I thought about Victoria and her clipboard, now just a footnote in my victory lap. The water sparkled, calm and contained, a reminder that nature and truth always find a way to settle the score. I tipped my hat to gravity and went back to my beer.